So in the previous demos, we've shown how to take an application from local development environment, deploy it into production. We've seen how we can resize the server that the app is running on, also how we can take individual components within the application and break them out and scale them independently. And what I want to show in this demonstration is specifically how we can scale our database and also illustrate how Nanobox keeps your data and that your data is safe as Nanobox resizes your databases. So I've added a database, which you can see here. I've added Postgres. So I can see that if I pull down the app components, I actually can see that now I have a web.main component, so a web component, and also a data component. I just named it DB. And by default, the database gets launched into that platform server that all of the that everything lives in, and that all the platform is launched onto. So if I wanted to move that out, and actually before we do that, let me just explain one thing really quickly. While a database is on a shared server like it is here, databases tend to be greedy and sometimes become a little bit vicious and start stealing the resources, and they don't really care who else is on the server. They just start to consume the resources. And so Nanobox has to do something special. Whenever a database is on a shared server, it actually limits the resources. So if we want to scale up our database to be able to use the entire capacity of a server, first we can open up Move, and we need to select a new single component host. If we select a new multi-component host, that essentially means that the database is going to be on its own server initially, but other things can actually be moved into with it. And with that sort of setup, Nanobox is going to tell the database to be restricted so that it doesn't actually consume all of the resources, so that it actually can be a good tenant instead of a greedy neighbor. So if we want it to have all of the resources available, we select a new single component host, and now we choose the scale. So let's say I wanted to use all of a 1 gig server. I would select that, move along in the process, click submit, and confirm that I'm okay for this component being unavailable for the duration of the migration. Okay, so as we've seen before, we're going to follow a similar process. We're first going to order a server on our cloud provider account, and once that server has been ordered, we move to the provisioning step. And this is where we install updates, we configure a firewall, we set up the network, install Docker, tidy up some security and permissions. And also in this case, we're going to go to the previous server here, and Nanobox is going to tell it to allow this new server to talk to it, and vice versa. So that kind of sets up the stage for what we're going to see here. The new server has been provisioned, and it's going to, step one, it's going to install the database and get it up and running and accessible. So that at the end of the first step, we will have 2 Postgres services running within the same network. And then we move to step 2, which is we will do an initial data migration. So it's going to take all of the data from the first database, and it's going to sync it over to the new database. While that initial sync is happening in the second step, your database will still be accessible, transactions will still be allowed to go through, all database operations will be allowed to go through. We can actually see that happening now, which moves to the third step, which is we're actually going to stop the first database, so that no new operations can go through. And we're going to do an incremental sync from the first to the second. So anything that happened while that initial sync was happened, any changes to the database that happened will get transferred at that point. And that third step is really just to try to minimize the amount of downtime. If you have a massive database and it takes an hour to transfer from one database to the next, we don't want to take your app offline during that phase. So then the fourth step, which actually has already happened here, is it will run a quick checksum against the data and verify that the checksum from the new database matches the previous. And once those steps have been completed, it's going to start the new database, migrate the IP address over to the new database, and at that point the application will connect to the new database. So just like that, no experience required, we're able to take a database that used to be on this shared server, and we were able to move it out onto its own single node cluster where we can actually see the host itself. So we can then take that, we can move it back in, we could move it out, but you can do however makes sense for the app. And mostly what I wanted to illustrate here in this demonstration is that Nanobox takes the challenge of migrating your data head on. We don't shy away from the challenge, and it's something that the team behind Nanobox has spent years perfecting, and we have hundreds and hundreds and if not thousands of implementations where we've learned some hard lessons, and you don't have to go through that. It's really easy. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of comfort in knowing that wherever you want your data to be, or even as you start, you can start small and then you'll be able to scale up your database without having to really plan ahead. And hopefully this has given you a little bit of comfort. So I encourage you to stay tuned. We've got some really fun and interesting things to show you still. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you soon.